Hello everyone, my name is Abayomi. You're welcome to the step-by-step .NET series, the part 2. Today we'll be looking at how we can build a web API with the controller-based approach. So I'll open my item, cd into my document, clear. Then I'll create a new solution file, new SLN, new output folder will be heroes. So the O is saying create a new solution file inside the heroes folder. Then we can see inside the heroes folder. If I do ls, we have the heroes SLN. Cool. To create a web API, inside I'll do .NET new web API. The output folder is heroes.api. Make it simple. So we have the template ASP.NET Core Web API was created successfully. Makes sense. So if you build our API, let's see what will happen. The warnings that we're going to get. We are unable to find a project to restore. Invariably, we created an API project, but it's not recognized by this solution file. Then we need to add it. We can use the .NET SLN, add, then using this wildcard, SqLite. Then we have project heroes API is added to the solution. Makes sense. Then if we run .NET build again, build, we should have succeeded. And let's open this project in our VS Code. If I open the heroes.api, we have the controller folder, we have the obj, the properties, the heroes, the CSproj file, and the program.cs, which is our main entry file. If I go into the CS, the program.cs, we have web application create build. Let's add any controller service, and this is enabling our OpenAPI Swagger documentation. Then we can run. So let's run this application to see what we have here. Then if I run .NET run projects, because I want to target the heroes API, I do heroes API.api, heroes.api. I hold my command and click on this localhost. Then we go to Swagger index.html. We have this other forecast. So this is coming from the, if I expand this and I try it out, click on execute, we can see a list of objects coming from the weather forecast controller. So let me stop my application, and so that we can start from scratch. I'll delete the weather forecast. But before we proceed, let's create our entity. Instead of creating it in a single file, let's separate our concerns. I'll do .NET new class library -o heroes dot entities. That is the shape of our application, the internal representation of what we want to build. Then we have the entities. This is the class library. And how can you know if you are working with a project, with an API project or a class library? If you go into the CSproj, you say this is using the SDK, Microsoft.NET SDK, but in the API, you see the web here, .web. Makes sense. Then if you write, let's build again, .NET build. Perfect. If let's create the shape of our, let me do music. So we have a music class. I'll delete this default class 1. Let's do property int, let's call it ID, then prop, let's call this string, I'll call it general, then I'll assign string dot empty then public datetime, let's call this release date. Then we have get set and its release. I'll do prop, I'll do bool, a boolean value is released. Cool. So let's create our controller. Again, if you have the C# dev kit, you can just right click and create a new API controller. But let's start from the scratch. So let's do music. Then you must always suffix with the word controller. So we are creating a team controller. You have team, then controller. It's just the convention here. Then you need to add three things here. We need to hear it from the controller base. Then we had our API controller attributes. Then you're gonna have your routes here. The third one is to have your routes. We do API controller. So what this code does is to have your music. So it's saying your local host. We have our local host, your port number, ports, then /API, then pick the name of this controller. That is, it will pick the music here and append it to it, music. And again, you can write it like this. You can have your routes, then you can add code your API music directly, whichever one works. Well, let's start with this for now. So we have our API controller. This indicates that a type and all derived types are used to serve the HTTP API response, blah blah blah. And the controller base is a base class for MVC controller without the view support. So if you are building MVC application, you want to use the controller so that you can be able to return the view. But in our case, we're just building a web API. Let's create an endpoint that returns hello world, a very simple one for now. So we need our method, which is what HTTP method type is get. Then we do public action results. Then we can have a string. Then just say, let's call this guy ping. Then we open our curly brackets. Then it's telling us not all code returns invalid. That is, it wants us to return a value. We do server is up. Then we end the statement. As simple as that. So we have our HTTP get. This identifies an action that supports the get method. We have different methods such as get, put, options, add, and so on and so forth. So let's run our app again. If I do up run project API, then we go back to our browser. If I refresh, we should have the API music. Then we try it out. Server is up, it's running 200 status code. So I have created a list of agenda to follow today. We have readme.mds. We have the controller based approach. We've created a class library, created a web API project using the output flag. Then we added a solution in the beginning of our project. Then we need to reference our class library. The next thing is to reference our class library inside our web API. I will show us first the error we will get and how we can use this. So let's create a demo DB that will store our music, demo DB, or data store. So I'll do private static a list, that is return list of music class coming from this entity folder, music class, then we call it music, or let's call music, something like this. Because new list of music. Then we open, create this guy. Then if you press your command period or command dot, we will not be able to import it because it's coming from another layer, coming from another folder that is not within this API project. So to reference this music class coming from here into the API project, we need to reference it. To reference this music, I'll come to I'll do .NET add heroes.api, add, then reference the heroes.entity. Then if you check your CS Proj, you will find this project reference. That is, we are referencing the entity here. That is, we are referencing the entity heroes CS Proj inside our API. So if you go back to your music and you press command period or command dot, you can see we can have the using statement coming from the entities folder. Then we have it imported here. So let's create a list of music that we have. We'll do music ID equals to 1, genre equals to pop, its release equals to true, and release date let's change it to the dot now so that we don't have to add code that. Go back to the music, release date, we do date time dot UTC now. Then let's go back to our controller. I will duplicate this number of times. I'll call this meta and reggae. Let's do ballad. Turn this guy to false. Then let's return a list of, let's get all the music that we have here. Again, we create the HTTP get, and I'll do public action result, turn a list. That is, I want to return a list of music. Open this. Then I'll call this guy get all music. Then open, then I'll return music underscore music. Then let's run our app again. So .NET run project API. We will see it's going to error out because we have two gets here. Let's go back to our browser, refresh. It's saying fail to upload API definition. So we need to tell the app that this get is different from this by just putting the name here. Let's put a name. We do get all music. Then let's refresh our app. Go back to the browser, then refresh our browser. Now you have music. This one is for the ping, and this one is for get all music. If I click on try it out, we have all the music coming out here. Cool. So we are still using the demo DB or the data store, the inbuilt data. Let's do how we can add new music. So we do our HTTP post, the public, the action results, then it's going to give us a return type of music. Then we do create new music. So we open this guy. So let's get the new music. We do music dot add. So what are we adding? We're adding add, and we need to get data coming from our clients. So we call it give us the music object. Then we call it music. Then we add the music here. We close. Then we can return. Let's return a string first. So just return music added successfully. Then if I refresh, then go back to my browser, refresh my browser again. So we have the get in blue and the post. So if I see get all music first, let's see what we have here. We have 1 to 3. Then click on add music. Try it out. We have ID. So let's put ID 4. Let's do pop. Pop again. List date. Let's add this to it. We have music added successfully. Then if you refresh the get all music, you should have the 4 added to it. Pop. Makes sense. So let's do get by ID, HTTP get. We open a bracket, then we pass in the path variable, that is get a single one. Then we do public action result, then returns music, a single object. You get by get music by ID. We're passing this ID, so we are saying get by ID. Then let's find the music first. Music equals to the music list coming from temporary DB dot first. So we have a number of ways to find a single music. So you can use the find first or default. Then we can say the music items equals to where music dot ID coming from the list equals to our ID coming from our client side. Then we can return the music. Simple as that. So we are using the first or default. This returns the first element of the sequence that satisfies a condition or a default value. If no such element is found, another way is to use the single or default. This returns the only element of the sequence that satisfies a condition, and if no such element exists, throws an exception. So we have find too, find index and so on. But let's stick to our first or default. Then if the music is not in our DB, let's do error handling. So if music equals to null, then we can return not. Let's return not found. Then we close. So let's refresh our server, then run our project, go back to the refresh our browser. Then we have by ID. So we have this ID of integer of int32 by default. I try it out. Let's find 6 because we don't have 6. We are getting this error not found for coming from this line. That is, if music is null, return this. But if I type in 1, let's see what we will get. We have the ID of 1. Cool. So let's do the HTTP get, or let's do delete. Still the same ID by path variable ID. I'll call this, let me copy this so that it will be fast, and paste here action results. Let's just do string, return a string. Let's call this delete by ID, pass in the ID here. Then we can copy, let's find first and return if not found. Then we format then if found, what do we want to do? We want to remove, we do music dot remove, then remove what? The music object. Then we can return yay, music removed. Then let's start again. Refresh our browser. Then if you get, let's try this is a ping. Let's try the get all. to get or try it out. We have 1 to 3. Okay. Then if you go to your delete, let's remove 4 first, giving us not found. If I remove 1, we have music removed. Then if you refresh this guy here, you have 2 and 3 only. We've done all this. We've done the controller base, class library, web API, the output flag. We've added a new class library to our solution. We done the referencing of the entity layer into the API project. We've done the API controller routes, the methods, the get, the CRUD operations. Lastly, let's learn how to persist into our database. That is, at the moment, whatever list that we have here is just inbuilt. Just have 1 to 3. We are not persisting into our database. So let's do that. To do that, you can head over to this website, nuget.org. Then you can search for Microsoft Entity Framework. So if you click on this is an ORM, an object relational mapper that helps us to interface between our application and our database. So you can copy this. But before doing that, let's create another class library so that we can separate our concerns very well. I'll go back to the root folder, clear again. Let me zoom in. That's too much. Clear. Then Control B. So I'll do .NET new class lib. Let's type our heroes .infrastructure structure. So we want to connect to our DB here. Our DB connection will be happening here. Then we have, okay, let's do enter. Then I'll close this, go to close this, expand structure, delete this default class, then create a new one called class app db context. Then we need to inherit from the db context, which is not available at the moment. Let's add our infrastructure to the solution file, because at the moment, if we check, we only have the heroes API. So if I do .NET SLN add them up, so we've added the heroes entity and the infrastructure to the solution. Here, let's see that this is the heroes project and the infrastructure here. Cool, makes sense. Then we're having this error here. It's saying the namespace DB context cannot be found. Cool. So let's install our package. We see it inside the heroes.infrastructure. We clear this terminal. Then we head over to our NuGet package. We take this command, paste here because I'm using 7.0.0 add entity framework core. Then if you press your command period, command period, you can have this using Microsoft Entity Framework core. Cool. So the next thing to do is to create our constructor. So you can type ctor. Then we have our DB context options. Then we're taking our app DB. Then we do options, inherit base options. The next thing to create our DB set, public DB set. We bring in the music. Let me call it music. Then we do our get task setup. So let's import this. So we cannot import the music because it's coming from another class library called entities. So what we need to do is to reference the entity class or the entity layer inside the infrastructure layer. So I'll come here, I'll clear cd back, then do .NET at infrastructure heroes, okay, structure, then reference the entity. Then we have here the heroes class being referenced. Then if you do command period entity, makes sense. The next thing to do is to add our database connection string and our database clients. So if we go back to the README, close this. We have different database clients. We have the SQL Server, the MySQL, Postgres, but for this demo, we are using SqLite. If you go back to the NuGet package and you search SqLite, let's see what we have. So this is what we're looking for, the Microsoft Entity Framework .SqLite. Then we copy, go back to my code, and in the infrastructure layer, I'll cd heroes.infrastructure, paste, change it to 7.0.0, click. And with this, you need to install the tools too. So I'll copy this guy, paste here. We need tools, and the design. So I'll copy this, clear my screen, paste, change this guy to 7.0 tools, and again change this one to design. So if you check your structure CS approach, you should have SqLite tools, design, and the main entity framework core. So 4 packages, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll clear my. Then in the program.cs, let's add our DB connection string. So let's add our connection string by typing var connection equals to builder.configuration.get connection string. Then the name will be what? Default connection. Then we close this guide. Next we had our DB context here. Add DB context. Then we do builder.services.add DB context. Then we pass in our app DB context coming from the infrastructure layer. Then we do options, no option, then this, close the bracket. Then we drop down, we do options dot use SqLite, then passing the connection string. Then if you try to import the app DB, it's saying change app DB to context. It means it's not inside here. Then let's reference it in our, we do .NET add heroes.api, then reference heroes dot what's it called, infrastructure. Then we can bring this guy in. Cool. And we have any issue with add DB context, so let's resolve that. ISAP collection does not contain definition of add DB context. We need to install .NET, the design, the framework design, add heroes.api package. Let's add the package here. Do Microsoft. Let me get it from the browser. Microsoft Entity Framework. I'll call it design, and the version is 7.0.0. Makes sense. So what we have here is to import, use SqLite coming from the entity framework core. Then we have all this settled. The next thing to do is to add our connection string, our DB connection string to our app settings.json. I'll come here, I'll write connection string, default connection. So whatever you have here must be the same to the default connection. So let me just copy just to be safe. And I would write data source equals to, let's just call it hero db or hero.db. Makes sense. So the next thing is to migrate our music class and convert it to the actual SQL query ado.net. Here, entity framework core, the ORM that we installed earlier, migrations. Don't forget to put the S, migrations, then add, I'll call this initial migration. Or let's call it initial 01. Then target the project, which is our heroes.infrastructure. Then our startup project is the heroes.api. Click on .net. Okay, I made a mistake there. .net ef, not .net. Okay, then this will create a migration folder. Your startup project Euro API does not reference entity framework design. So let's install this design here. So let's do .net add Heroes API package. I keep writing .net package. Okay, 7. Let's add this. Cool. Then let's run that command again. So build started, succeeded. Then it will create a migration folder here. So we have a migration folder here. Then if you expand the migration folder, the initial 01 that we typed earlier, this 01 here, this is it. Then if I choose, it's just telling us migration builder create a table called music coming from our DB set that we created in a entity layer. Music, this where are you? Here, musics. Create a table name called musics. Then let's go back. Then it must have an ID. Then general, which is what? Text, which is our string, release date, text. Then the bool is integer. That is 1 is 1 is true and 0 is false. Then we create a primary key and so on and so forth. And this one will drop the table, the migration builder drop table name music table. Cool. So the next thing to do is to update our database. The first command that we run, we will just create this migration folder with this file initial 01, but we've not see it as staging and not committing into your GitHub. So this one is just staging it. The real command to create our tables in our DB will be .net ef database update, and the project is heroes.infrastructure. Then we have our startup project will be heroes.api. Good. Yes, so build started, be succeeded. Then we have the actual SQL query coming from here. We have Microsoft database command, blah blah blah. Then we are selecting, okay. Then we have the create table music, then ID. So this is the actual SQL query So this command we also create the hero.db that we wrote in our condition string hero.db. Then to connect, you can download this extension called MySQL by Win Chan Chen. Then if you click on the database, this is the extension, create a connection. Let me zoom out a bit. Then you can click on where is SqLite, Lite, then click on the path. So if you go to your heroes from the path, click the API, you have the hero.db here. So I'll click on hero.db, then I will open, then connect. We have success, connect, success. Then if you expand this guy, we should see our migration history and the music table. Then if you expand the columns, we have ID, general, release date, its release, and so on. So we have been able to migrate our database. After we are done with our migration, we can go back to our music controller class. Then let's comment this guy out. Then let's inject our DB context controller DB. Let's inject our app DB context using dependency injection. So I'll do private read only app DB context coming from the infrastructure layer. Then I'll call it, let's call it context. Then we create a constructor, CTOR. Then we add our app DB context coming. Then let's call it app DB. Then we can say our context equals to app DB context. Then we clean this guy up. So to return a list of all the music, let's do something like var music equals to the context dot the music class musics now dot to list. Yep. Then we can return music. Yeah, let's test. Let's give it a try. Let me comment all this one out first. Then do .NET run project. .NET run project API heroes.api. Then I'll click on this guy. Then we go to our Swagger browser, which have get all music. Then try it out. We should have an empty string, empty array. Yes, it means it's working. Now let's run through them one by one. For the post, let's add from this data binding here called from body. Then remove this. Let's do context dot add. Then we have our music object coming from our music. Can I spell music? Then we close this guy. Then this one is also staging, not committing to a DB. Then the actual committing is context dot save changes, and we have the asynchronous, and we have the async equivalent of the save changes called async save changes async. Yes, but you have to use await here. Await, then you convert this guy to async await, then you save changes. Then let's return okay, which is what 200. Okay means create a okay result object that produce an empty source code of 200. Okay, then we can pass in our, what should we just do? Let's say created music created successfully. So we have the return type of an async method must be void task. So we need to convert this one to task. We do async task. Let's do I action results because we're using that. clean this guy up. Action results, sorry, results. Action result. Yes, working on. So public async. If you want to use async, you must wrap it in this task table, system trading task, blah blah blah. Then return. Define the contract that represents the result of an action method. So let's test this. Refresh our server again. Run, then rebuild. We have the post. Then we don't need to pass our ID. Now, this one will introduce us to the concept of DTO, data transfer object, where we can hide certain fields from what we want to create. Then we don't need to pass in our ID. I'll remove this guy. I'll just pass pop, release true. Then we have music created successfully. Then if you go to your get all, not this ping, where is it? Get API music, okay. This is the ping. Get all music. We have ID created. Now, before we continue, let's create a DTO or a contract so that we can hide certain things from the client. We don't want to expose the ID, so that we can just pass in the general, and the release date. General and release date only. So I'll create another class library called contracts. So .NET new class lib. The output will be heroes.contracts. In our contract, I'll delete the class library, delete, close this guy, then let's give it a class of, let's call this request. Escape, let's call this request, create a new folder called requests. And let's create a folder called responses. So in our request, new class called create music request. Then we want to have public. Let's do prop. String. What do we have in our entities? Music. I'll just copy the genre and let's just copy the genre. Then let's copy another thing is released true. Then we can add our data annotations here. So I'll go into my, so let's add .NET, let's add reference, the heroes API, then reference heroes contracts. Cool. Then instead of passing this music, let's bring in our create music. What did we call it? Create music request. Then command period. Is this the correct name? Do I have it here? Let me check. Contracts. Okay, it's the create music. Let me copy the class name, request, and dump here. CD into the heroes API.net build. Something is wrong somewhere. Oh, works now. So it's coming from the heroes contract request. Then now we need to do mapping. You can use a mapper like AutoMapper or Mapstar, but let's just do it manually here. So we now do var new music equals to new music class coming from the actual music class. Then we can open a code block. We can say the genre equals to music coming from the DTO.genre. Then we have the release is released equals to the music coming from is released. Then we can close this guy. Then we can now add the new music to the DB like that. Then if we refresh our app, start our app again, we do .net run project, go back to the browser, then we should only see 2. So we are hiding certain properties from our client. Then we can, let's do reggae and false. Music created successfully. Let's check again. We have, oh, this is not. Then we have try it out. We have 2. So let's do get by ID. This one should be this one should be simple. Instead of context we do instead of music we do context dot musics dot first of find of default, and that should be it. By ID, let's find this one. By ID, let's find this one. ID, and we got 1. So for the delete, let's activate these. Then we convert. We also say context dot musics dot first of default. Then let's remove from the DB by doing context dot musics dot remove. Then we can save changes dot save changes. Always changes in the DB. Then if I do .net run projects, then go back to refresh. At the moment we have get all music. We have 2. Then if I delete 1 with the ID of 1, delete, then get all again, we should have just 1 here. Makes sense. And the last one, again, let me just copy the find guy, so we can create another contract or another update, because we want to separate it. Update music request. So we copy this. Yes, you want to update the is released only. Pass it here. Close. Go back here. Then we do update. Update what? Update music request. Update music request. Copy this just to be sure. Paste. Then why are you? For a strange reason, let me build it. .net build. Okay, it's working now. I don't know, sometimes it will not update automatically. It takes time to update. So we don't have the music.genre here. We just only have music is release equals to update.release. Then we want to context about context.music add music, then save changes again, context dot save changes, then you want to have music. Then if I do .net run project, go back to our browser, refresh, then we take one, because one is not available, you should throw not found. Great. Let's do 2 is released to what do we have on is released on the 2. Try it out. We have false, so let's change it to true. Makes sense. To true. Another code. We have this error, an error code why saving entities changes. See now changes for details. Unique countries with music.id. So what is music.id? Where do we have music? Context first of default music.id equals to. Oh, the mistake I made was sort of let's put updates. That was a mistake. Then let's clear, then run this guy again, then go back and refresh. Let's edit 1 is not found, and 2 should give us true. Okay, makes sense. So now we've converted the release field to true. So we've been able to establish how you can use a temporary database and how you can use the actual database. And we chose the SqLite to commit or to persist our data in our DB. In our next class, we'll be using the repository layer to separate our concerns folder, and also we'll be using the automapper as opposed to mapping manually here. Automapper is a package for converting objects, one object to the other. In our case, we have the music class, the internal shape of our data, and the create music DTO request. Thank you for watching. See you in the next class.